Thanks, Ralph, and thanks everyone for the time. And if you don't know who AT&T is, then there's not much I can do about that. So we are a global company, and I'm Chief Architect and Director of our Energy Solutions organization. And so as AT&T looked a couple years ago at the way we were approaching and supporting our customers, we realized that we could probably do a better job if we realigned our large customer segments into vertically aligned organizations. So over the next, starting last year in 2014 and going through 2016, we're actually realigning the top 1,000 or so accounts into verticals. And so I'm in the energy group as a chief architect. And just to put some perspective around how big AT&T is, just to give you guys some understanding, we have a huge amount of plant, right? Our plant isn't the same as a manufacturer's plant. Our plant is fiber in the ground, it's switches and routers. We have 1 million fiber miles across the globe that we support and maintain. We have 60,000 cell sites across the U.S. That doesn't include what we just bought in Mexico with IusaCell and Nextel International. And everything we have, all the switches, routers, firewalls that we use for our internal network and as well as support for our end customers, we monitor them 24/7. And we have 60,000 technicians and maintenance engineers who support, go out and do break fix installations. And as we look at how we support our organization, asset management is absolutely the #1 concern we have in our industry, because if we have one piece of equipment fail, it could actually mean an outage for a company like Shell, which is our largest enterprise customer. So we look at asset management as core to our network support organization. We've been around for 140 years. We are the second largest global communications carrier. And the things that we do on our network to provide better services to our customers, we try to look at how we can take that experience and expertise and translate it to our customers and bring expertise beyond the technology and the networking that we give them every day. So a great example is we had issues with our truck batteries failing. So we actually developed an analytic platform that looks at telemetry coming in from every one of our maintenance trucks, every one of our service trucks in real time, and we predict 2 weeks in advance of when the batteries will fail on those trucks, and we no longer have truck outages because batteries fail. We've completely eliminated that issue. It was a huge issue for us. We actually had, if you order UVerse and you expect your UVerse technician to come and he doesn't come, you don't like that. So your first experience with AT&T should be a good experience, not a bad experience. So that's just an example of where we're taking analytics and big data and we're saying, how can we now use that for our customers' advantage? So hopefully I can answer some questions in that vein.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dan. Paul already's got somebody to ask a question. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Bill Muldoon with Aviva, and Dan, we are a personal and a corporate customer for AT&T, just to give you a little plug there. My questions are actually for Deb. Ray and I talked about this out for over lunch a little bit, and maybe you can give us some insight. Ralph had on a slide about integrate with improved interoperability. I know Fiatech's all around interoperability, which is great. You write the data into contracts. One of the areas we see happening is the CapEx to OpEx transfer of information. A lot of good work done on the front side, a lot of good things on the back side, but it's that movement of that information, the handover that happens there. You are integrated, so you have a lot of your engineering in-house versus using contractors, even though you do use EPCs. How do you, A, handle it internally to make that transfer of information so it stays live, enter once, use many, internal, and then how has Dow been doing it from an external, using like KBR on Sadara or some of the other projects that you're working where you have external EPCs? Just if you could share with the crowd, and what are some good practices that maybe we could look at to change those industries to do that from a contractual standpoint, not from a technology standpoint?
I would say it's an opportunity area for Dow, first of all, so I don't claim to have the answer on that one. It's an area that we're getting ready to actively explore. Again, the barrier for us has been not having one maintenance system to feed into. So you didn't want to build 12 different interfaces. So we've been doing it semi-manually, right? Maybe we'll do an Excel worksheet upload or something, but that's it. So it's an area we're getting ready to tackle pretty heavily in 2015. I think what we are, the challenge I see on the contract side is we write it into our contracts now. We want this data back in this format in this way, but compliance is relatively low. So we've got to go back and look at our contracts and look at, well, what other levers can we pull? Because you think we'd have a pretty big lever, right? We're paying them. You'd think they'd give us back the data. So I think, again, from an owner's perspective, the guys in the capital world writing those contracts don't feel the pain maintenance feels when the data doesn't show up. So we've got to do a lot more cross-functional pain sharing. Maintenance needs to start to scream louder, and engineering needs to listen, and procurement needs to step in there and make it happen, right? So it's a multifunctional challenge. I'll let my, Kevin Snowden's going to talk to you later. You can
Yeah,
ask
no,
him a
that'd be
question
great.
too.
I'll listen to it, but I think it's, what you said is correct. Ray and I were talking about it, is basically having that, contractually write it like you're doing, which is good, but secondarily is to have the KPIs or initiatives that are driving the business, both from capital and OpEx, to have some shared responsibility. That's how you allow that data to flow. Otherwise, they have different directives, right? CapEx is looking for cheaper, faster, on schedule. OpEx is looking for uptime, maintenance, low maintenance, which are differing from capital. So you said
Right,
it
you
that
need
way.
a shared scorecard.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else? Don't be shy. Can I just say, Ralph, that I hope that by the time augmented reality becomes a standard practice, that I'm retired? I'm a wimp.
I don't know why you say that. I think it's really cool.
Well, it is, but let somebody else deal with it.
Just to talk about the HoloLens just a little bit, there is, the Kinect, let me just backtrack a second, the Kinect that's been available with the Xbox for a while is a 3D scanner, so it measures depth as well as where you position your arms and stuff like that. So that technology has been improved a generation or so and is in the headset itself. So this HoloLens knows the environment that the individual's looking at and how far away things are and stuff like that. So that when you project augmented reality in the HoloLens, it can know where that wall is, for example, and project the augmented reality on the wall. So it looks to you as though it is on the wall rather than in space someplace or something like that. And if you have somebody else on the other end guiding you who's familiar, they can actually circle a tool and tell you to pick it up, for example, or point and show movement of, if you have to turn a bolt or something like that, can give specific direction around the bolt. So it isn't up in space because that Kinect devices in the headset and can measure the environment, can actually focus on that particular bolt or whatever you have to do. So the possibility of giving an individual direction from miles away, that is very useful direction versus something like FaceTime. I mean, that could help too, but this is kind of a whole step ahead of that.
And I would add, it's about the user interface. How complex or difficult is it to do this? It's going to become simpler and simpler, just like, well, kind of trivial example, but kind of the way you record shows on TV now. Used to be you had to program that box and all that stuff. You had to enter in what day of the week and whatever, but a channel and time and all that. Now you just take your little controller, point at it, and it clicks and it records. And that's the way this will be for augmented reality. It'll just become simpler, and it's already out there. There are software providers that have systems that allow you to do that, and as they do it, and Bill raised his hand, so Aviva could show you theirs probably out at the booth out there. And so it's just going to get easier to use.
Yeah, so Paul, 2 years from now, Paul is going to play this tape and embarrass the heck out of us.
Yeah, I'll just maybe expand on the last set of questions, which was on the CapEx and OpEx and balancing the perspectives of each. And so when you're talking about maybe one solution is having a more balanced scorecard where the pain is shared throughout that. But one of the issues is time also, because in the CAP project, you're compressing an intense amount of spending in a very low period of time. So any pain point in that phase is really acute. So the pain point in the maintenance side that the maintenance people feel from not having that SF information is at a much lower threshold and over a much longer period of time. And so it's very difficult. How do you anticipate then being able to balance that, because the project team sometimes is even gone by the time that pain manifests over in maintenance, where the project team's disbanded and they're on to the next capital project, and they're not even the same configuration anymore. The funding's gone, the team's gone, there's no there to go back and balance that scorecard with.
But I think I mean, we all work for the same company, so I think if we can articulate the pain we cause maintenance, but just a simple example, okay? So you want to put an instrument into your maintenance system. I got two choices as a capital project. I can put the minimum in, check the box, instrument is in the ERP system, or I can take the time and move all the data I have at that point that I know about that instrument in. And what we have to do is we have to be able to articulate to the capital project team the value of that difference, that 30 minutes per instrument difference, so that they say, well, I know it's going to cost a little pain, but look at all the money I saved maintenance downstream, because they don't have to go look for that information. We have to dollarize the longer-term pain downstream and make the project team aware of that. Also, I can also set as a requirement, there's no success for this project is full data transfer. Right.
But, you know, putting the concept of putting the instrument in, is that then who's setting the hierarchy? Who's, you know, because from the design perspective.
Maintenance owns it, right?
Maintenance owns
At that
it.
point, maintenance owns that data, so.
But you're asking the designers to put in the asset information.
Didn't say it was easy.
All right.
Well, if I could add on that, in the case of, Deb's got a very good situation where the design team is in-house, so if they do bad,
There's consequences. They follow you. They find you.
Now, if you're dealing with an EPC, where if they do bad, once they're paid, you're kind of out of luck. That's one reason, I refer to the handover as being the most dysfunctional process known to man, well, certainly in asset lifecycle management. That's why we are such strong proponents of the stage gate process. So before the EPC disengages, maintenance or the owner-operator is there pulling the information and has a chance to make sure they get the information they truly want. And I really like what Deb brought up about the quality of the information. Make sure that it is quality information that's useful and not just something they could throw over.
Yeah, because
I'd add also that maintenance has to invest in this also, because if they're going to have stage gates and review and determine quality of information, they've got to get engaged early. They've got to learn from doing that and build it in at 0.1% planning up front, so they define better what has to be done, and then they have to participate to evaluate it and provide that feedback. So it's not just the capital people that have to do more. The maintenance people have to get engaged early, differently, and make it the design construction should have continuous handover occurring through stage gates all along the way.
If I could just ask a question, we've been talking about handover a lot, and I'm saying it's ugly. Is there anybody in the room who is happy with the handover process for their projects? Anybody raise their hand? Yeah, that's the response one person. By the way, that's the response. Usually there's one person who puts their hand up. Would you mind for a moment telling us about the process for your handover?
Again, from lessons learned of the past, when we started this project, what we essentially ended up doing was we ended up making a CFD of the project team and the operations team, specifically the maintenance group in that operations team. Got them involved right from stage one of the project, from the time of the design of the equipment and the manufacturing processes. So once we had that team together, and they had a common set of goal sheets, and we had data on all this equipment that was running on all these plants for many, many years going into this project. So right off the get-go, we had this data that we went in when we designed and gave out the specifications and the standards for the equipment that needed to get built. So as a result, when we went about executing this project and setting up the plant, and we got this done in about 22 months' time, and I'm talking about 2007, 2008. The last 4 or 5 years, I must say, the equipment uptime and all the other metrics that we measure ourselves to in operations and the maintenance of equipment is world-class. So whether it's a body shop or a paint shop or vehicle assembly in the assembly plant, I must say that having worked in this fashion where it was a joint effort between project and operations, it worked out beautifully for us. That was a big step up from many of our past projects that we have executed. So, yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
That's kind of
I just have to add a little bit. Back in, Terrence, when did you have your event? Was that August or July? Wasn't it July? So Terrence was kind enough to allow me to speak at his event in July in Bonita Springs, Florida. And there was an audience a little bit larger than this. We were having a similar discussion around, it got the handover, and I asked the same question of the audience. And there was one individual who put their hand up and gave an answer almost identical to the answer that this fine gentleman gave us, and the answer was all about, like he said, the operate and maintain maintenance people were involved in the project as the project was being executed, rather than having a, end of the project handover, bulk information transfer. And they were able to look out for their own vested interests as a team and get the information they needed. So it's amazing to me that the two answers were so similar at two different events. Sorry, go ahead.
Ralph, I was just going to comment that, I guess it was November that Chevron and Mustang actually talked about what Ray just talked about, which was the continual handover, basically, as it occurred. So you were able to start to see the trends of their, the information being built. It wasn't just show up with the big truck and dump it type of thing, as you said. And that continual progression approach allowed them to actually then to modify as need. And then, as you brought forward, having the O&M team as part of it. So that was a successful handover because they weren't doing it as a chunk. They were doing it in mini gated type of movements, which is the right way to do, I think. But so I just wanted to pass it. That was at the Rice Forum that was in November that Mustang and Chevron discussed that in Houston. So.
Yeah, I think the challenge there, obviously, is the earlier you hand it off, the more management change. You have to have it at the data level, and that's a challenge from a technology standpoint, is just saying, what's the state of the data? Who owns it at this point in time, and who's managing the change of that, right? So.
It does kind of surprise me that you only had 2 positive responses to that question, because it's certainly not rocket science. It's not even difficult science to understand that. We have very successful implementations of this, not just yours, but others. When I was a younger project engineer, I became very quickly aware of the fact that the best way for me to get off a project, a successful project, was to make sure that operations could run the plant that I did designs for, and maintenance could take care of the system that I just put in. And it only took one success for me to understand that's something I'm going to do over and over and over again. So every project, when it came to the purchasing phase, as a supplier, I fought for, let's get operations, let's get maintenance involved in the project execution, because it will be successful. I have lots of proof that it will be, and again, it's not difficult science. It's something that's repeatable and will most always be successful.
Well, it's...
Can I just say that
Go ahead.
those are suppliers that are talking, not end users.
All right, okay. One more.
I was at a presentation last November in London from the new high-speed train group that are building high-speed transport across the breadth of the UK. And they talked about in taking this to the nth level in terms of 2 virtual systems and a real system that they were designing and building. So one virtual for operations guys to mess around with, and one virtual for the maintenance guys to mess around with, and considerable expense to do that. But everything would be aligned, all of the changes were there, everything was, talk about business information management, it was an amazing display. And to take a shot at you Americans, I turned to an American guy sitting next to me afterwards and I said, that was really cool. And he said, it'd be nice to see something like that built on the East Coast. And he said, nobody would ever go that far to do it because there's not enough return on it to be able to do it. And it speaks to the comment you made, Deb, about can't get people interested in new technology because it's all about the return and not about the investment and the payoff later. So I'm interested in a couple of comments about, what do we do about that? Or, even what is our sense of the changing marketplace? Because having suffered with this all my life, I don't see a light in the tunnel. I do, but it's a train, and it's coming, and the new ones are going very quickly. So,
Great, you want to talk to that?
Actually, So I think my perspective's a little bit different, right? As a carrier, So all this is great in virtual reality and augmented reality. I think it's absolutely the future. The challenge is, whose network are you going to run all this information over? So think about that before you start implementing extremely bandwidth-intensive applications that the minute they stop, they don't work the way you think they're supposed to work because you didn't tell your IT folks that you're now tripling their bandwidth requirements because you're not streaming video. You're streaming 3D video. It's being analyzed on the other end and shot back in less than a second, right? So you're talking about applications that even our network, our core backbone is a 60 gig network. It's not designed for this. So we're actually looking at a 100 gig backbone in the next couple of years because we see video as 75% and 3D video as 75% of the networking traffic. So make sure, and this is if I leave you with nothing else, make sure your IT folks and your networking folks are part of your core teams as you look at next generation asset management applications, because it's going to be critical, because if those fail, then all the planning you've done is for naught, right? The networking it's the blood and veins of the communication of your system's operations.
Were you asking that question from network bandwidth and connectivity viewpoint, or from how do I justify a project and get management attention so they're willing to have the resources travel?
The second one, but it's a good point you make about putting the right tools in place. When we put in a simple software tool, double the bandwidth, or increase our bandwidth for our plants, we discovered that the plant bandwidth was being sucked up by operators watching
YouTube.
late at night.
Yeah.
And instead of challenging the operators, we double the bandwidth.
We actually do application layered firewalls now, and so they're not allowed to use during core hours, right? And so you got to be careful, because especially in the U.S., if you're a union plant and you lock out YouTube, you might have a strike on your hands, like they do in Deer Park.
Wow. I'll just, we'll have to end this, but I just want to address the management attention viewpoint. And I'll just point out that the senior executives, their metrics are very visible. It's the P&L statement and the balance sheet. That's how they get measured by Wall Street, the board of directors, et cetera. If you can connect your project to the P&L statement and the balance sheet, and I refer to things like uptime, asset longevity, cost control, then you will get their attention. When you get their attention, they'll allocate budget. When they allocate budget, then you have the resources for a successful project in that order.
So I can just tell you, Peter gave us a hammer, right? He came in as Vice President of Manufacturing and Engineering and says, I want $1 billion of productivity improvement. I now have a hammer. Any project I can tie to delivering that productivity improvement, I'll get support for. I mean, it's got to be pay for itself, but have a good return. But you need a hammer, and if you don't have a hammer, it's harder and harder, right, to build a house or whatever. So.
And I agree with what you're saying, Ralph. I'm going to fight you a little bit because
Go ahead.
the challenge I think we face is that a lot of the paybacks for this discussion that we're having, 80% of life cycle cost is determined in the design phase, right? So we know that that's going to get us later, the benefits, but the benefits are later. And today in the market, it's all about today, maybe tomorrow, and the payback for an improvement that you make that saves you money down the road over the next 20 years, my CEO really doesn't care. He's more interested in, what are you going to do for me today, which is a bit counterproductive to what we're trying to do. So I vent, but I wanted to make that point with you.
I can't disagree with some companies that are run by quarter executive bonus and not really a longer-term plan. I don't have an answer for that one.
If you do, let us know.
Yeah.